It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. Welcome to Creative Writing Corner. I'm Luke J. Morris, here in my backyard, trying to stay healthy and stocked up on toilet paper. That Dickens quote seems to reflect the world we're living in. Now with the outbreak of COVID-19 or coronavirus, it seems more than ever like we've fallen victim to an ancient Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. I'd like to find the guy who pronounced that curse upon our generation and wring his neck. May you live in interesting times indeed. So let's get on with today's lesson. We are talking about openings, story openings. These days, a strong opening is more important than ever. In an era of dwindling attention spans, it takes skill and luck to craft a strong enough cover and blurb to get a reader to even take a look at your book. If what's inside the book doesn't engage the reader's interest right away, that book goes back on the shelf and the reader grabs another book. Or worse, gets distracted by TV or social media. So, when I talk about story openings, I don't necessarily mean the opening sentence, though that is important and that is mainly what we're going to talk about today. But really, I'm talking about the first idea or image that you want the reader to pull from your piece, as well as the reader's first taste of your authorial voice. Remember, if the reader's not engaged by the end of the first page or even the end of the first paragraph, chances are they're going to put the book back. So you need to strengthen your story opening. This doesn't just go for books. This goes for any kind of story or piece you're writing. Now, I'm going to read you a few classic, memorable, and powerful story openings. These are famous story openings generally, and see if you can figure out what they have in common. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. George Orwell, 1984. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, translated Gregory Rabassa. It was a pleasure to burn. Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. Rage. Goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous doomed that cost the Achaeans countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls, great fighters' souls, but made their bodies carrion, feasts for the dogs and birds, and the will of Zeus was moving toward its end. Homer, the Iliad, translated by Robert Fagles. That's our first non-novel. That is actually an epic poem, the opening to an epic poem. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. Kurt Vonnegut, Harrison Bergeron. That's a short story. You might recognize these a little more recent novels. If you are interested in stories with happy endings, you would be better off reading some other book. Lemony Snicket, A Series of Unfortunate Events, The Bad Beginning. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Douglas Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, of number 4 Privet Drive, were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for those of us who are American. So did you see what those openings have in common? The way I see it, a great opening should contain 3 elements. It should say something new or unusual, or say what it says in a new or unusual way. It should catch the reader's ear. The author's voice or style should carry with it a type of music that grabs the reader's attention and makes them want to hear more of that authorial voice. And it should present a mystery to solve, immediately making the reader want to know what it's about and what happens next. Each of the openings I just read you guys said something unusual or in an unusual way. Each opening had a distinctive voice or style that attracts the ear of many readers, myself included. One thing all those works have in common, I've read all of them from beginning to end. That's why I did not include the opening to James Joyce's Ulysses on here, even though it is a great opening. I haven't finished that book. It's hard. So a great opening is not an entire great book, but a great opening is a good start to a great book. And each opening, of course, raises a question or two in the reader's mind. What's going on here? And what's going to happen next? That desire to find out is what keeps your readers reading. So let's look at American Book Review's number 1 best opening line from a novel. Call me Ishmael. Herman Melville. Moby Dick. At first glance, this doesn't seem to meet any of my criteria. Call me X is hardly a new thing to say, after all. But let's look closer. Notice, Melville doesn't open with, my name is Ishmael. Had he done that, we probably wouldn't remember his novel nearly as well today. Instead, he says, call me Ishmael. What's unusual about opening a book with this sentence structure? By saying call me, he's addressing the reader directly. He's essentially grabbing you by the collar and yanking you into his story. It's an unusual opening with a definitively distinctive voice. Call me Ishmael. But does it raise a mystery? Yes, it definitely does. By saying call me instead of my name is, the narrator of the story is implying that Ishmael might not be his real name. He does not give a last name. Why would he ask us to call him something instead of just telling us his name? And why call him Ishmael? The name Ishmael has religious roots. In the first part of the sacred texts of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Ishmael is the eldest son of Abraham, the father of nations. So what significance would that name have in the story? And why did he ask us to call him that? These are the questions, again, that make the reader want to read on. And Moby Dick is a difficult novel to read, I will say that. It is not my favorite novel that I've gotten through, but there are some amazing parts to it, and it is a gem of a book. And I'm very glad I read it, and that opening line is part of what made me want to continue reading. The entire opening scene features churches praying for people who are about to die, and rooming with a cannibal, and we meet Captain Ahab, and as a matter of fact, the first chapter is incredibly interesting. Things start to slow down after that, and then they pick up later on. Moby Dick is an interesting book. If you want to talk about that sometime, we can discuss that later on. So just to show you that I practice what I preach, here are a few story openings of my own. These are all from my first published book, my short story collection, Tales from the Teeth, available on Amazon. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Give you some reading material while we're all home. Mickey Murtaugh twirled the knife in his hand like a baton, ignoring the blood it drew from his fingers. Mick the knife. No matter how fast he flew, she would catch him eventually, and then he would die. She swelled from the sea. The coffee nearly killed me, but first it killed a whole bunch of other people. Java, a cautionary tale. Just a few openings, and, it's up to you how well those applied. I can't claim to judge my own work objectively, but that was me attempting to apply those lessons years ago when I first published that book. Your assignment today is to write a dozen or so short story openings, or long story openings, just story openings. Keep those 3 rules in mind, all right? And if any of those openings inspires a story in you, carry forth and write that story. Again, the 3 rules: say something unusual or in an unusual way. Say something musical, really impart your voice or style to that. Make it a style that people might want to follow along and hear more from you. That's all about practice. Practice is the only thing that can make that. Practice and feedback and continually improving. Style is something that can be learned. Voice is something that you develop on your own, but they both kind of combine to create your writing. And yeah, we'll talk a lot more about that later, but there's a lot of work that goes into that. That might be the hardest component of this. And then raise a mystery. Insert a what if there, or what happens next. Give people something that 2 and 2, or just the 2, so they can figure out where the next 2 is, so they can put 4 together eventually. You're just giving them the opening. You're giving them the introduction and saying, here, you want to find out what this is about, right? You want to find out what happens next? Go. That's your goal for an opening line. All right. Keep those 3 rules in mind, and if any of those openings inspires a story in you, carry forth and write that story. I hope you're all staying healthy. If you are sick, I hope you're staying away from people, taking care of yourself, and getting medical care if you need it. It's a weird world out there, but we will get through all the weirdness together by staying apart for the moment. For the time being, anyway. The silver lining of that is, now we introverted writers have an excuse to sit at home and write. So let's get to it. Good luck with your story openings, my friends. Stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Hey there, fellow writer. Thanks for tuning in to Creative Writing Corner. I hope you got something valuable, or at least ridiculous, out of this episode. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more great writing tips and tricks, and if you have any writing questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like me to discuss, leave them in the comments below. Thanks again, my friend. Until next time, keep the words flowing.